Thank you all for coming. It's been a great conference, right? Brilliant weather. You all enjoyed it so far, yeah? Thank you for sticking it out right until the end, to the last talk in this product track. I was talking to Belinda, one of the organisers earlier, and she said, "When are you talking, Eben?" And I said, "Oh, I've got the last slot, Belinda. Obviously, you've saved the best till last." She said, "No, Eben, Gwen's going last." So, I don't know what that tells you about my talk, but we're going to find out in a moment. I wanted to set up a little exercise just before we get into this, so that you've got something to take away and use with your teams, maybe, as a little thinking point. It doesn't really have anything to do with product development, but it's an interesting exercise. So, do you think you could all stand up? Have you got room to do that? It's very simple, don't worry, it's not a difficult one. So, all we've got to do is draw a clockwise shape on the circle, clockwise shape on the roof, right? So for those of you who've got digital watches, it's like that. Yeah. All right, so we're all getting that, yeah? Can I see some thumbs to show me you're all getting that? Yeah, definitely clockwise, yeah. Okay, so now if you could just really slowly bring it down like this, till it's in front of your face. Yeah, still clockwise, good. Keep bringing it down till it's under your chin. Then look down on top of it and tell me what direction it's going. Right? All right, but you were sure that was clockwise. I'm sure somebody put their thumb up. I didn't get much of a confirmation, but that was definitely clockwise, right? And then it was anti-clockwise. So you feel free to sit down again. I don't want to overextend you at the end of the day. But I like to use that sometimes with teams and clients just to talk about this idea that even you can be really sure that you're absolutely right about something. And it definitely is like that. And it turns out it's not. I mean, I don't know if you had any other experiences of that particular exercise. Anybody done it before? No? Okay. Well, take it away with you. Try it out. You can have big, long conversations about context, such things. So I'm going to talk to you today about awesome products. Inspiration or iteration? Which one is it? I purposely created a dichotomy. A friend of mine told me, well, it's neither of those, Eben. You can't do that. But I thought I'd purposely create a dichotomy so we had something to talk about and so we could juxtapose things a little bit, right? Is it clockwise? Is it anti-clockwise? Depends on how you look at it. So I want to go back to when I first started my... Am I? Yeah. Go back to when I first started my career in technology. 2.2 million years ago, we began creating technology. Right? We began creating products. This is an example of a hand axe created about 600,000 years ago. But 2.2 million years ago is when we started doing it. It was Homo habilis. Homo habilis means handy human. Right? So they're the first people to start making tools. This is when everything started to change. This is when we started to become users of tools. And it really has driven us as humanity, right? As who we are and what we do. We create tools. And these tools were used and still are used to manipulate the environment, right? So if you have one of these 2.2 million years ago, then you're going to be much better at gathering food and creating shelter, right? That gives you power, that gives you control. If you can make these, that gives you even more social power and control, right? And it allows you to manipulate your environment. So if you can make them and use them, that's a really handy thing. A little bit later on, about 20,000 years ago, we started making these. These are batons. Now, they're not really sure what these are about, right? So this is 20 centuries ago, quite a long time ago. Not really sure what they're for, but some of the theories that the archaeologists have come up with is that they use these to work out the passage of the moon, right? That's what they think these dots are for, right? So you could work out where is the moon, what's going on with the moon, what season are we in? And that's apparently what these little vertical slots are for. So if you could do that, if you could use that technology, or create that technology, then you were the shaman, right? You had the power. You could predict when was a good time to harvest, when was a good time to plant, what was going to happen with the weather, what was going on with the seasons. 20,000 years ago, Europe was in the middle of an ice age. So it was pretty important stuff, right? So again, these tools and technology give you power and control over your environment, right? And if you can make them, if you can distribute them, if you can use them, I mean, just even using them is a pretty powerful thing. If you can make them, doubly powerful. So I think that we've always used tools to make us more awesome. Now that is a wingsuit. You may have seen a YouTube video with a guy in Switzerland flying down a mountain. So these guys have jumped out of an airplane. That is a skydiver sitting on the back of somebody wearing a wingsuit, riding them, presumably not all the way to the ground, right? But certainly, you know, that's pretty awesome, right? Without technology, we're not doing this kind of stuff. So we started out with hand axes, and by the way, you know, we were mass producing hand axes 700,000 years ago in little workshops, if you can imagine, 700 centuries ago. And now we're here, right? Jumping out of airplanes, riding on the back of people wearing wingsuits, and filming all with a 3D GoPro. And that, to me, is pretty awesome. Right? This is what we use technology to do, to make us awesome. And this is what great products do. They make us awesome. They make us better. They enhance our abilities. So Kathy Sierra wrote a book called Badass, Making Users Awesome. I don't know if anybody knows Kathy Sierra. She wrote a lot of the Java head-first books back in the day. It's a really great book, and it's all about how products are there to make you awesome, essentially, right? To make you brilliant. So if you think about something like Photoshop, right? Photoshop makes me a much better photographer. Yeah? So I've got a Monzo card in my wallet over there. Makes me much better at not spending too much money. Makes me much better at controlling my money. Makes me better at understanding where my money's going. So it makes me financially more acute, let's say. There was a product we were looking at downstairs called Tuesday. I don't know if anybody saw that, Marcus's startup. Right? So he wants you to be able to take control of when your payments come out. Right? So that's going to make you more awesome at paying your bills, right? And that's probably quite a useful thing to be awesome at, paying your bills. Yeah? So this is what we're trying to do with products, right? Products that succeed are trying to make us awesome. Now, I have a little problem with some of the narrative that we have around product development, entrepreneurship, startups, and things like that, right? We have this hero narrative. I don't know if anybody's come across this, but I've spoken to a few people over the last couple of days, and there's this huge hero narrative, right? And the problem with the hero narrative is that it makes the entrepreneur awesome rather than the users. Right? It refocuses everything onto the entrepreneur being amazing and awesome, and not the product stuff. Right? And so you might not believe me, so I've got some proof. Here you go. So there's a VC over there talking about why entrepreneurs are today's heroes. Here is a website called Entrepreneur Magazine or whatever, saying you are a hero. And here's Inc.com, saying 4 ways entrepreneurs live the hero's journey, right? So the hero's journey is that journey where, we won't go through the whole thing, but essentially hero, well, he says it over here. Underdog character with some sort of defect encounters insurmountable odds and uses the way of the hero to overcome danger and get some divine inspiration along the way. And this is one of the things that we come across in product development, is this idea, when we follow the hero narrative, that we're going to get divine inspiration, right? We're going to get this kind of bolt of lightning. It's going to come down, and we're going to go, wow, that's it, right? And then it's all just execution. And that's kind of what the hero narrative is about, right? It's execution. Slaying the dragon, execution, that's the heroic act. And I've not seen this. I don't know if you've seen this anywhere, right? It's difficult being an entrepreneur, fair enough. It's a challenge, it's an adventure, yeah? But I think when you frame it with this hero narrative, you take away from the product. You start framing the entrepreneur as being awesome rather than the product. And that's the problem if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to develop a great product, right? Because actually you might focus on trying to make yourself awesome. So culturally, I think there's a bit of an issue. I think it's the wrong focus, essentially. So what I did was I thought I would do a bit of research, right? So I put a questionnaire out there. I wanted to know what people were doing, so I've had my own experiences of this. In the mid-2000s, I worked for a startup as the CTO of a startup, and we pivoted so many times, I had to leave because I was getting dizzy. It was the most pivoty place you've ever been. And I've been other places where there is never a pivot, right? You wait for divine inspiration. You've got to sit in your office and come up with a solution, then execute. Right? Somebody said strategy is all execution. Well, I'm not sure it is. So I created this little questionnaire, and this is really an abject lesson in if you haven't done any science for about 25 years, don't create questionnaires. Because all I really learned from this was that I wasn't very good at creating questionnaires. I mean, we did find out from the overwhelming 11 responses that people were close with their idea, and they iterated and evolved it, right? Brilliant, okay, good. And also that nobody's really got a process for that, which is interesting. The thing I didn't really know was, are these successful products? Right? But anyway, it's still useful to know that, yes, people are, they were kind of close with our idea and they're iterating. Okay, fine. So that's a good thing. But so I kind of failed, really, in my attempt to get good data out of a questionnaire. But one thing that is definitely true is that product development is a social act, right? So if we go back to thinking about this idea of making the user awesome, right? It's a social act. You're making the user awesome, right? You're creating a hand axe for them so that they can better hunt game or whatever it is, or chop down trees or whatever it might be. That's a social act, right? You're having an impact on society around you. It's a social thing. So let's have a look at some companies that have done very, very well. So I'm sure you know who these people are. They started out in 1998, a company called Confinity. A chap called Max Levchin came up with this idea that he wanted to be able to beam IOUs between Palm Pilots. Anybody have a Palm Pilot? Everybody remember what they are? Everybody heard of them? Good, good. Right, so a few of us had Palm Pilots back in the day. This was, mid-90s. And his idea was, as I say, let's beam IOUs to each other, right? And then the next day they can be settled in the bank and we can move money between us via infrared beaming on a Palm Pilot. Brilliant. Unfortunately, not everybody had Palm Pilots, and he's out there looking for money. So he built a demo on the web for people who didn't have any Palm Pilots, so he could easily show them, he could talk to them over the phone, he could show them how it works, right? And he put it in an obscure corner of his website and kind of forgot about it until a couple of months later when they looked at their web stats. And what they noticed was there was an awful lot of people using this demo product that he'd built really for himself to demo to potential investors and interested parties, right? People had found it, word had spread, and people had started using it to make purchases on eBay. Now, this rather annoyed him, right? Because no, this is supposed to be on the Palm Pilot, right? That's my idea is the Palm Pilot, go back on the Palm Pilot, get off my website. So he tried blocking it, he tried doing all kinds of things, and eventually he decided, well, I'm going to go with it. I'm just going to go with it because this is what's working, right? This is what's making users awesome, not the Palm Pilot stuff. And so you've probably got the app on your phone. It became PayPal. It was PayPal. Now, if they hadn't made that switch, right, and they'd never made that demo, and they'd just gone, no, divine inspiration says we're doing Palm Pilots, that's it, then maybe you wouldn't have it on your phone, maybe we wouldn't have PayPal, maybe somebody else would have done it. Don't know, right? But luckily, he noticed that something was going on. You've probably heard of these people as well. A lot of developers in the room probably will have heard of Glitch. Anybody heard of Glitch? No? Okay. That's good, because now I can tell the story. Otherwise, this is going to get a very short presentation. So, Glitch was founded in 2010 by Stuart Butterfield of Flickr fame. He was creating, again, another online multiplayer game. Unfortunately, 2011, he had to shut it down. He raised a couple of million, got the game going. It was moderately successful, but not successful enough to sustain itself. He got rid of 30 people. And then, interestingly, the most interesting part for me about this story when I was researching it was that he spent a month finding all 30 people that he let go jobs. What a nice guy. Anyway, So they'd done that. They still had a bit of seed funding left. All right, small team of about 8, and they thought, well, what have we got left? What can we use that we've still got left? Right now, these were old school web people. They built Flickr before that, and so they started out using IRC. A bit of internet relay chat for all of their team communication stuff, and that kind of worked out a little bit. You've guessed who it is, haven't you? That kind of worked out quite well, right? But then it kind of started to get constrained. They hacked IRC a bit, and still not good enough, so they kind of built their own version of IRC, and it turned into quite a good team communication tool. And they, when they sat there thinking about what have we got, they thought, well, we've got this thing. Let's see if it's any good. So they gave it to a few other startups they knew, started socializing it, and that became the billion-dollar company you know as Slack. So again, they could have just stuck with the game, right, and burned the money out right till the end, right, to the end of the runway. That was it. In fact, weirdly, Stuart Butterfield's done this twice with Flickr. So Flickr, he started out with, he was building a game as well. And then they realized that actually what was working in their online game was a real-time photo sharing app. And that became Flickr. So he's quite good at doing the pivot, right, of seeing where is it we're making users awesome. So that's Slack. You know who these people are, right? There's their old logo on the left, new logo on the right. YouTube. Now, I wonder if you remember this. YouTube's tagline used to be tune in, hook up. Because when YouTube launched in 2005, the guys who created it so that single people, let's say, could upload videos of themselves, introducing themselves, and talking about what they were looking for in a partner. That's what it was for, YouTube. Yeah, tune in, hook up. So they launched it, 2005. They let it run. 5 days later, no videos. So got a bit desperate, and like all desperate people, they went to Craigslist, and they offered to pay people $20 to upload a video of themselves. Right? Hi, my name's Eben. I'm looking for whatever it is. Nobody did it. Right? So in desperation, they just started randomly uploading videos of cats and all kinds of stuff. Right? And pretty soon, it started to take off. And a year later, well, you know what happened. They sold it to Google for $1 billion. Right? A year later. So again, that was another pivot. It wasn't like a technical pivot away from where they were, but they had great video upload technology. But they had to move to where customers were awesome with it, right? Customers were not interested particularly in publicly uploading videos that everybody could see, right? But they quite happily upload videos of their cats and get likes on that. So, last one, before I tell you about what I think they all share, kind of from a process perspective. This is another company that you know of really well. Again, probably 80% of you got it on your phone. 2010, I'm going to say his name, you'll guess who it is. Kevin Systrom created an app called Bourbon. Right? He wanted to capitalize on the craze for location-based apps because Foursquare was really big at the time. So he created this app called Bourbon where people could check in, they could plan future check-ins, they could post pictures, and they could earn points for hanging out with other people who are on Bourbon. Right? Cool, makes sense. Foursquare were doing something similar. But it just wasn't sticky. It wasn't really getting a lot of traction. So again, he went back to the stats and he had a look and he said, well, what is working? What's going on? Let's look at the numbers. Let's see what people are actually doing, right? Because if you can't talk to your users, then the only thing you've got really, right, is numbers, is stats. So he had a look and he saw that people were sharing photographs. And he's like, oh, this is interesting. People are sharing photographs. Great. Maybe we'll change it so that you don't have to check in first. What you do is you share a photograph and then you check in. So he did that. There's a little uptick in users. Okay, fair enough. Then he went off on holiday with his girlfriend to Mexico. And they were walking down the beach and he said, look, why don't you take a picture and put it up on Bourbon for me? So she took a picture. I said, yeah, but look, Kevin, the quality of this photograph, it's nowhere near as good as my friend's photographs. And he said, well, show me. So we had a look at her friend's photographs on Facebook and realized that this person was using filters. So that night he went off and learned how to code a filter, created filters for Bourbon, and slowly got rid of all the rest of it. Right? So it was just photos and filters. And there you go. Instagram. Right? So, Now, whether that was, part iteration, part inspiration, it's kind of both, right? But there's a definite thing here about not just going, no, I'm going to make this work. So again, I was talking to another friend of mine who said that, but you need to have the courage of your convictions. It's like, right, yeah, we do. But what if nobody likes those convictions? Right? What if actually it's not driving us in the right direction? We have to know how to make people awesome. So, how is Instagram making people awesome? Socially, right? Making them look awesome. Look on Instagram, check out people's lives. Everybody, apart from me, is having an amazing life. Right? They all live essentially in paradise, right? Around a swimming pool, drinking cocktails all day long. It looks, Instagram world is pretty amazing. So you are making people awesome in one way or another. That's the key, right? So I want to skip back. Something I forgot to mention was maybe there's some of you here who don't work for startups, right? And so you're thinking, well, what's that got to do with me? I don't work for a startup, right? We've got this product that apparently I have to make awesome. The thing is, right, every company I talk to now is saying, oh yeah, we want people to be entrepreneurial. We want people to be innovative. So the pressure's coming throughout the ecosystem to be more startup-y, right, to be more awesome. But again, it's not about you being awesome, it's about your customers being awesome. Right? So regardless of whether you're starting a brand new product or you've got an existing product, the game is to make your users awesome one way or another. Right? And when those users are awesome, they're going to talk about how this product makes them awesome. Right? Oh, wow, how did you create that presentation? Well, I've got this excellent product. Right? It makes excellent presentations for me, or whatever it might be. So, luckily there is a way of thinking about this. There's a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by a chap called Steve Blank. He's a professor at Stanford. This is the first book he wrote, 4 Steps to the Epiphany. The second book he wrote is called The Startup Bible. They're both brilliant whether you are in a startup or not, right? If you're developing products, they're both brilliant books. The Startup Bible is big. You can't read it all in one sitting. I recommend you read a couple of chapters, have a lie down, and then have another go. It's quite heavy. So Steve Blank, professor at Stanford, also taught Eric Ries. Eric Ries took what he learned from Steve Blank, with his permission, and wrote The Lean Startup. Yeah? So 4 Steps to the Epiphany is my top tip for you. He now teaches entrepreneurship and innovation all kinds of crazy, interesting places, not just startups, but in traditional organizations. He's been doing it in the Department of Defense. He's been doing it in all kinds of interesting places. So these 4 steps, what's it all about? It's about this thing called customer development, basically. Right? Again, focus on the customer. So we're not thinking about, picture there? We're not thinking about, how do I make myself awesome? How awesome am I going to be? Am I going to wait here for divine inspiration? Right? I'm thinking, no. I need to get out there and somehow, so Steve Blank talks about, there are no ideas inside your building. There are no good ideas inside your building. Get out of the building. All right? All you're going to hear inside the building is, yeah, that's great, nice. And from your friends and family and extended network, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, but would they pay for it? Would they use it? Right? They're just trying to be supportive. Get out of the building, find some real users, right? And find out how do they want to be awesome? How can you help them to be awesome? This first stage, customer discovery, has a pivot point in it, right? So the first thing you're going to do is create hypotheses. I'm sure you're relatively familiar with creating a hypothesis, right? But you're creating a problem-solution hypotheses, first of all. Right? I believe this problem exists, and I believe that this solution might fix it. Now, you've got 2 things you're testing there, the problem and the solution. So you could, if you want to, break that down into 2 separate hypotheses to test that problem exists or not. Right? And when I say problem, what I really mean is need. Do users have a need for this? Right? I don't know if did anybody go to the jobs to be done thing with Oslam Use this morning? So one of the things about jobs to be done is it's about helping people make progress, right? Helping people move forward with their lives, right? With whatever they're trying to achieve. whether that's just paying bills or whether that's creating images or looking better on social media. You're trying to find out how to help people move forward, right? So you create a hypothesis and you're trying to turn that into a fact. You want to know, does this problem exist? Does this solution solve it? Oh, it does. Okay, great. So then you either pivot if it's not true. No, there's not really a problem, or it's not big enough a problem, or people don't realize they have that problem, whatever it is. But you keep going until you prove your problem-solution fit, and then you create some kind of MVP. And so Steve Blank coined the term MVP, minimum viable product, and he uses it initially here in this cycle, right, to test your hypotheses. So what's the minimum thing that I can do to test my solution? I've proven that there's a need for this out there in the world, right? What's the minimum I can now do to go out and test with real people, not inside the building, showing my friends and my colleagues and my boss, look at this great thing I've done, right? But out there with real people saying, okay, I think you've got this need. Does this fix it for you? Right? Minimum viable product. Viable being, will it survive the pivot to customer validation, or will it not? And you're going to have to go back around the circle. That was the whole idea of the viability of it. Does it get you to the next step in customer development? Yeah? So you're testing out your idea on real people. Now, I was chatting to the guy who created the Halo app, the My Taxi, what's now My Taxi, it was bought by Daimler, and I also read his book. And he talks in there about going to coffee shops, literally. I mean, I know it sounds a bit hackneyed, right? But going to coffee shops, talking to people, testing the ideas out. Now, maybe you can't do that if you're doing B2B. Maybe you've got to take a different approach. Maybe you use an online approach. I don't know. But that's part of your job as product people to work out, how do I talk to my customers? How do I define who they are? How do I talk to them? How do I find out if they have an itch that we can help scratch, right? And you know, will this particular thing help scratch it or not? And once you've done that, you move on to the second stage, customer validation, right? So he says here, identify scalable and repeatable sales model. What you're doing is you're saying, another hypothesis, right, that people will pay for it. Next stage, will people pay for it? And will they pay enough for it that we think it's a goable concern, right? Will they be able to do it? And I won't get into customer creation and company building because that's a bit further down the line, that's execution, but this is the iteration cycle, right? And again, you will go round and round and round this cycle until you find the answer. So there was a piece of work, the Genome Startup Project, been going for about 7 years now, I think, where they survey, I think they started out with 600 startups, and now they talk to a couple of thousand startups because there's that many more now. And they discover, of the successful ones, so they do much better research than I do, they've looked at the ones who've actually succeeded, and they've said, okay, how do you tell us about the environment, what are you doing, etc. One of the key things that comes out of that is they pivot at least 2.6 times. So between 2 and 3 times, the successful companies have pivoted 2 or 3 times, right? So you have to go around this cycle. You're going to have to get it a bit wrong. How wrong depends on where you start out and how much inspiration you've got and all the rest of it. Now, of course, you're going to need a bit of inspiration to go back round. Right? You still, you're going to need a bit of inspiration. There's still something coming from you. Right? But I would say, you're not asking your customers' opinions. So I totally agree with, Steve Jobs, who wouldn't. You don't ask your customers what they want because they'll tell you any old stuff, right? And they probably won't pay for it anyway. And they're not product people. Right? And people, when you talk to people one-on-one, if you're not careful, they just try and please you anyway. So again, you've got to be careful with this stuff. But you go through the first cycle there, customer discovery, turn your hypotheses about the problem solution, and then does this solution actually fix it, right? An MVP to move to the next stage, can I make any money out of it? Will people pay for this? Does it make if you've got an existing product, does it make my overall product better? Does it take away from my overall product? Right? Oh, there it is in words. So business model canvas, anybody use that? Yeah? So again, Steve Blank worked with, I can't remember the name of the guy who did business model canvas now, Swiss chap. worked with him on creating the business model canvas. So a lot of that thinking comes from Steve Blank, and it fits perfectly with that way of working. Right? And you create part of it. And again, the business model canvas, you're iterating over it all the time. It's not a static thing, right? You get it up on the wall and you're iterating over it. Right? You're adding information to it. You're testing your hypotheses. You're validating or invalidating your best or worst ideas. And finding out, again, how you can make your customers awesome, right? Start with the hypothesis, get out there and validate it, figure out your MVP, verify or pivot. 2.6 times, typically. So, choices, 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 right? This is the real kind of crux of it. How do I really know whether I should keep going or pivot? So again, I was talking to a VC about a year ago about this kind of stuff. And she told me, well, you know, you've got to be careful you don't pivot too early. You've got to be careful you've properly tested your hypotheses. You can't just test it on one person. Right? It's got to be statistically significant. And even then, have you tested it in the right country? Have you tested it in the right areas, right? So there's something here around, you know, you do have to have the courage of your convictions to some degree, right? But not blindly. What I would say is just don't fall in love with the idea that you have, right? That's an easy thing to do, fall in love with your idea, right? You know, they talk about ideas like their children, you know, giving birth to an idea, you know, it's like their children, you know, you fall in love with them. I would really avoid that if you want to be super successful, because you're going to have to find the right solution, the right idea. You won't, you know, it's 1,000,000 to 1 against, or maybe 1,000,000 to 1, that means you've got, you know, a 1 in 7,000 chance of doing it given the world population. It's probably worse than that, a 1 in a billion chance of being right with that first idea. You're going to have to, right, iterate over it. So love the process rather than loving your particular idea. Yeah. So I think this you know, this doesn't come from product development particularly. It's just a saying you might have heard, right? You should have strong opinions, but loosely held. Right? So you're gonna have strong opinions. So you can be excited about your idea and all that kind of stuff, but hold it loosely when you go and look for things that contradict your beliefs. Now, I think one of the hardest things here is this one: resisting the pressure to be consistent. So there's a lot of pressure socially to be consistent. Oh, but I thought you were pursuing XYZ idea. What do you mean you've changed your mind? People don't like it when we change our minds, right? There's lots of social pressure. Because people like us to be consistent. Because people like to be able to predict our behavior. So they like consistency. Nobody likes politicians who change their mind, right? Which is why they don't do it, even in the face of loads of evidence. Nope. I'm a man of my convictions, I'm sticking to it. Right? It's difficult. But if you're going to create great products, you're probably going to have to resist that pressure to be consistent. You're going to have to be able to say, well, I thought that was a great idea and I kind of loved it, right, at the time. I didn't fall in love with it, but I loved it, you know. I was passionate about it. I had strong opinions about it. But I discovered, actually, that there were a bunch of stuff that contradicted my, you know, strongly held opinion. Strongly, whatever, loosely held. Right? That you have to be able to let go. Now, I've had a few product ideas, and I've not been able to let go of them. And so to the degree that I've not been able to let go of them, so I've not actually been able to do them, because I've not been able to even approach the idea of having to pivot them. There's definitely pressure there to be, it's easier, right, if you just fall in love with your idea and stick with it. It's hard work going out there and pivoting all the time, right? Taking all these hypotheses, finding out that you were wrong, you were confused. But if you can, fall in love with the process. Fall in love with the process. Avoid all that confirmation bias, right? So again, talking to entrepreneurs, you'll discover a lot of confirmation bias, a lot of kind of retrospective coherence, right? You talk to them, and when they look back on it, they make everything sound like it all happened in one nice linear path. Everything was fine. Came up with this idea, yeah, in the pub, wrote it down on the back of a fact packet, me and my mates, and then we got together, and we coded up this little thing, showed it to these investors, they gave us loads of cash, and then we just executed. That was it. Right? And that's what those hero articles are based on, basically. That's retrospective coherence, though. That isn't really what happens. At least not in my view. So, how do you know? What's the sign? What are you looking for? How do you know when you can go to the next step, right? When you can say, right, now I've made it now. I've made it. I can move on. We can now focus on execution. I can go get marketing people. I can go get sales people. We're just going to execute now. How do you know? Well, again, there's no sure way of knowing. But there's some interesting ideas around it. There's a guy called Sean Ellis, who is famous for being part of the growth hacking community. And he says that you should survey your users. So at that second stage, right, where you're trying to work out your, this is going to make money, etc. Great. You should ask your users, how would you feel if you couldn't use this product? How would you feel if this product didn't exist? Right, bless you. And if at least 40% of them say, 40%, at least 4 out of 10 say, I'd be really disappointed. I'd be really upset about that. That's it. That's when you can go, right, okay, I think I've got traction. 40% of my users, that's pretty good, right? 4 out of 10, 40% of your users are saying, I wouldn't like that, actually, if your product didn't exist. That wouldn't make me very happy at all. I'd be very disappointed. I'd be quite upset, really. Right? So that is a sign you can look for to know that you can stop the cycle of hypothesis testing and pivoting and all the rest of that. And it's a measurable thing, right? So, just to finish up then, it's inspiration and iteration, of course. It was never one or the other. But you knew that at the beginning, didn't you? But there's an awful lot of iteration in there, right? And you've got to love that process and be inspired along the way by new ideas, new things. And you've got to be open to absorbing these things, right? So I would just say to you, remember, we've been doing this for a very long time, 2.2 million years, right? We've been developing technologies to make us awesome. This is why we do it, right? To make us more awesome. Remember that when you're creating your products, right? And make everybody awesome. Yeah? That's it. Thank you very much. Any questions, any discussions? Anybody want to share their thoughts? You just want to go? Go see Gwen. The real final talk. Yeah, no questions? No challenges on my hypothesis? All right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much.